There comes a moment, after you've given the best parts of yourself to someone who never knew how to hold them, where you stop trying to prove your worth and instead, you start protecting it. For the longest time, you believed love meant giving all of yourself. Not halfway, not conditionally, but completely. You were the kind of person who didn't just show up in someone's life. You invested in it, you remembered their favorite song, you checked in when they were quiet. You showed up when no one else did. You saw beauty in their chaos, potential in their wounds, and gave them a space to be more than even they believed they could be. But here's the thing no one tells you about being that kind of person. When your love is rare, people either treasure it or take it for granted, and if they're not ready for a love that deep, that honest, that loyal, they will mishandle it. Not because you weren't enough, but because they weren't ready for someone who sees straight through their facade and loves them anyway. You see, most people don't know what to do with something rare. They're used to convenience. They're used to quick gratification, to surface-level affection, to saying, "I love you," like it's a casual phrase and not a sacred promise. You were different. Your love had depth. Your love had intention. It wasn't a game to you. It wasn't a placeholder until something better came along. When you chose someone, it was real, it was consistent, it was patient, but not everyone is looking for that. Some are just looking to fill a void. Some are looking to feel wanted, not to truly connect. And when you give rare love to someone like that, they'll enjoy the warmth, but they'll never respect the source. So yes, you loved hard, you gave everything. You poured yourself out, and you ended up feeling empty. But let me tell you something. That wasn't a mistake. That was your strength. That was your superpower. That was proof that your love is one of one. And now your standards have evolved to reflect that. Because once you've experienced the pain of giving your all to someone who didn't value it, you stop settling for halfway love. You stop entertaining confusion, you stop chasing potential, you stop shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone, you start guarding your peace, you start matching energy instead of overextending yourself. You start choosing people who show up, not just speak up, because you've already learned what it feels like to be unappreciated, unseen, and misunderstood while giving someone everything you had. And now you're done, not bitter, just better, not cold, just cautious, not afraid, just aware. You're not impossible to love. You're just not willing to be loved wrong anymore. That's the shift, that's the growth. That's the power, let's talk about it. There's something lonely about being a person who loves deeply in a world that often celebrates detachment. You walk around carrying this heart full of truth, connection, and intention, but it feels like everywhere you turn, people are wearing masks, hiding behind games, trying to protect themselves from being seen. And there you are, open, honest, willing, ready. It's like speaking a language that most people have forgotten how to understand. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't want love, but because they've been shaped by a world that told them love is a transaction, not a truth. A prize, not a partnership. When your love is rare, it becomes something of a mirror. People see themselves in how you show up, and not everyone is ready for that reflection. You reflect what they're not giving. You reflect the effort they're not used to. You reflect a version of connection that doesn't revolve around control or manipulation. You offer something raw, something grounded in depth, not drama, and that's disarming. For someone who's only ever experienced affection as a strategy, as something earned through sacrifice, submission, or silence, your love doesn't feel familiar. It feels confusing, sometimes even threatening. You might find yourself in situations where people seem to admire you, crave you, even chase you, but the moment you start giving real love, consistent love, love that holds space and offers truth, something shifts. They pull away, they become distant, they start questioning things they once claimed to want, and you're left standing there wondering, did I do too much? But what if the truth is, you did something so right that it scared them? What if your presence activated their wounds, their fears, their patterns they haven't healed? What if it's not that you overwhelmed them, but that they were underdeveloped for the type of love you brought into their life. It's not an easy thing to hold. Being misunderstood in love is one of the most painful experiences we go through, not because we want to be worshipped, but because we want to be seen. You weren't looking for someone to fix you or complete you. You were just hoping for someone who could meet you. And over again, you found people who could taste the light in you, but couldn't sit in its warmth for too long. It's not that they didn't like it. It's that they didn't feel worthy of it. And when someone doesn't feel worthy of love, they will find a way to sabotage it before it proves them wrong, before it forces them to confront the lie they've lived with their whole life, that they aren't lovable as they are. You brought a kind of softness that had strength underneath it. You weren't passive, you were patient. You weren't naive, you were hopeful. And that kind of energy confuses people who are used to relationships built on ego, on fear, on strategy. You didn't play hard to get, you were just hard to keep, because keeping you would mean they had to be consistent, conscious, accountable. They'd have to grow. They'd have to match the emotional maturity you brought to the table, and not everyone is willing to rise like that. Some would rather leave than level up, and so you started shrinking. You toned it down, you questioned yourself. You wondered if your standards were too high, if your affection was too intense, if your expectations were too much. But let's reframe that. What if your expectations were simply too clear for people who relied on confusion to feel safe? What if your clarity made them uncomfortable because it demanded them to be real, to stop pretending, to stop deflecting, to stop hiding? People often say they want honesty, but they don't know what to do when it arrives. They say they want real love, but they still chase situations that trigger their trauma instead of healing it. You, however, weren't trying to repeat a cycle. You were trying to break one. You weren't interested in playing roles. You wanted something that felt like home. A love that didn't require armor. A connection that didn't need to be earned, but embraced. And that's why you felt alone, even when you were with someone. That's why you were exhausted, not from loving too much, but from trying to help someone see that they were worthy of being loved right. And the truth is, you can't make someone see that. You can't make someone love themselves through loving you. You can offer, you can reflect, you can hold space, but you can't heal them into readiness. That's not your job, and that's the painful lesson. That your love, while rare and valuable, can't be a cure for someone else's lack of inner work. You can be the safest place in the world, and they'll still walk away if they're more comfortable in chaos. You can offer emotional intimacy, and they'll still seek surface connection if that's all they believe they deserve. It's not a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their wounds. But when you're the one left standing with a heart full of love and no one to give it to, it doesn't feel like that. It feels like rejection. It feels like loss. It feels like maybe you're just too different. But here's what you need to hold on to. Your difference is your power. Your depth is your strength. Your emotional intelligence is not a burden. It's a gift. It weeds out the ones who can't meet you, and that's a blessing, not a punishment. You were never meant to be understood by the average, because the average isn't looking to grow. The average is looking to feel good in the moment, to be entertained, to be admired, not challenged. But you don't love for comfort. You love for connection. You love in a way that requires presence, requires effort, requires truth. And that love, that deep, rare, unwavering love, it will never be understood by someone who is still performing. You might have thought you needed to fix something in yourself, that you needed to become less attached, less emotional, less intense. But what if you needed to become even more of who you are? What if you needed to step even more boldly into your truth? What if the people who misunderstood you weren't meant to hold you? What if their confusion wasn't a signal to change, but a sign to move on, because one day someone will understand your love on the first try? They won't make you question your clarity. They won't punish you for your vulnerability. They won't shrink from your softness or mock your emotional depth. They'll recognize it because they've done the work to offer it too. They'll value it because they've learned the cost of taking it for granted. They'll protect it not because they have to, but because they want to. But to get there, you need to protect it first. You need to stop explaining your heart to people who aren't listening. You need to stop proving your worth to people who never had the eyes to see it. You need to stop offering depth to those who swim in the shallow end because they're too scared to drown in something real. You weren't wrong for loving the way you did. You were just ahead of your time in their life, but that doesn't mean you wait. That doesn't mean you dim. That doesn't mean you settle for being half held, half heard, half loved. You are not a halfway person. You were never meant to be tolerated. You were meant to be chosen actively, consistently, fully. And that kind of choosing only happens when you stop handing your love to those who haven't yet chosen themselves. So don't stop being rare, don't stop being intentional, don't stop showing up with your whole heart. Just be more selective, just be more discerning, just be more protective of what you offer, because your love isn't for the average. It never was. Your love is for the one who's done the work, who's ready, who sees you not as a fantasy, not as a project, not as a challenge, but as a partner. Until then, hold your own heart like it's the most precious thing in the world. Because it is. Speak your truth like it's sacred, because it is. Love yourself with the same intensity you once saved for others, because you are the one who needs it most right now, and maybe, just maybe, the person who understands your love is already on their way. But even if they're not, you'll no longer be bending for the ones who can't receive you. You'll no longer be trying to make it work with those who don't want to grow. You'll be loving from a place of fullness, not lack. Offering, not overgiving. Attracting, not chasing. Because once you finally accept that your love is rare, you stop trying to make it make sense to those who only know common. There's a difference between being hard to love and refusing to be loved the wrong way. It's a line that gets blurred by people who confuse standards with stubbornness, who label self-respect as being high maintenance, who weaponize your clarity because they don't have the capacity to meet it. But let's be real, you didn't get here by accident. You didn't wake up one day and decide to build walls for no reason. You built boundaries because life taught you through pain, through disappointment, through silence after honesty, through rejection after vulnerability, that not everyone who walks into your life deserves access to the parts of you that you once gave away so freely. You weren't always like this. You used to accommodate, you used to adjust, you used to twist yourself into knots trying to make relationships work that had no foundation. You mistook effort for worthiness, thinking if you just tried a little harder, they'd finally see you, finally choose you, finally meet you halfway. But what you eventually learned, sometimes the hard way, is that no amount of love you give someone will make them ready to receive it if they're not ready to receive themselves. So now, you don't move like that anymore. You've shifted, you've grown. You've outgrown the version of you that thought staying silent to keep the peace was strength. You've let go of the belief that being chosen means lowering your standards to meet someone where they're stuck. And that shift, that sacred hard-earned evolution, gets misunderstood by the very people who benefited from your lack of boundaries. They'll say you've changed, and you have. You're not the version of yourself who begged for crumbs and called it love. You're not the one who mistook chaos for chemistry. You're not addicted to potential anymore. You're not interested in guessing games or decoding mixed signals or waiting for someone to decide if you're enough. You already know you are. The truth is, the moment you began loving yourself the way you once begged others to, you changed the game. Because suddenly, you weren't chasing attention. You weren't proving your worth. You weren't available for convenience. You became intentional with your energy, selective with your space, and that's where the misunderstanding begins. To someone who only ever knew the version of you who overgave, who apologized for their bad behavior, who stayed longer than they deserved, your new self looks difficult. But that's because they can't control you anymore. See, when you didn't have standards, they didn't have to rise. But now that you do, they either have to grow up or go. And most people don't want to grow, they want access. They want the benefits of your presence without the responsibility of showing up. They want your softness without offering security, your loyalty without accountability, your love without effort, and when you say no to that, when you say, "I'm no longer available for half love," suddenly you're too much. But that's just projection. You're not too much, you're just no longer available for people who give too little. Let's be honest, standards aren't walls, standards are filters. They don't keep love out, they keep the wrong kind of love from draining you. Because you've been there before, you've given chances to people who gave excuses. You've prioritized people who made you an option. You showed up fully and were met with breadcrumbs, and it almost broke you. But it also built you. It woke you up to the reality that love, real, healthy, mutual love, doesn't require you to bleed for someone else's comfort. It doesn't demand silence, submission, or struggle. So now, when you say, "I need consistency," it's not a request, it's a requirement. When you say, "I value communication," it's not a bonus, it's a baseline. When you say, "I won't tolerate disrespect," it's not a threat, it's self-respect. And yes, that eliminates a lot of people. It weeds out the ones who only know love through chaos, the ones who rely on your overfunctioning to avoid their own responsibility, the ones who think your love should come without conditions, without effort, without the same investment in return. You're not bitter, you're just better, wiser, clearer. You've seen what happens when you abandon yourself for the sake of being accepted. You've felt the ache of loving someone who only showed up when it was convenient. You've dried your own tears on nights when the people you showed up for disappeared. And after all that, you still have a heart that's open. That's not weakness, that's power. But now, that heart comes with discernment. With standards, with boundaries that say, "I love deeply, but I also love wisely now." It's funny how people will label you as high maintenance when you finally ask for the very things they promised at the beginning. They'll call you demanding for expecting follow-through. They'll say you're difficult when you no longer chase their attention. But the truth is, they never expected you to wake up. They got used to the version of you that didn't require effort. They expected the free access, the one-sided loyalty, the emotional labor you carried without complaint. But that version of you, the one who tolerated confusion, who explained your worth over and over, who clung to the hope that maybe they'd change, that version is gone. And it had to go, because love without standards becomes self-destruction. You needed to lose who you were to find who you are now, and who you are now, you're not here to settle, you're not here to beg, you're not here to convince anyone to see your value. If someone doesn't come with peace, with clarity, with respect, they don't get access. It's that simple. But here's the part that people don't talk about when you raise your standards. It can get lonely for a while. Because you're no longer emotionally available for the people you used to entertain. You no longer say yes just to avoid confrontation. You're no longer willing to fill someone else's emotional gaps at the cost of your own well-being. And that creates space that feels empty at first. But that emptiness, that's not loneliness, that's self-respect in progress. That's your soul cleaning house, making room for what's aligned, for what's real. Because when you finally raise your standards, you don't attract more people, you attract better people. People who don't make you earn love, but match it. Who don't see your standards as threats, but as a reflection of what they already live by. People who don't need to be chased, coerced, or convinced because they want to be there, fully, consistently, authentically. You don't need everyone to understand you, you just need the ones who do to find you. But they won't find you if you keep lowering your energy to meet people in places you've already outgrown. They won't recognize you if you keep performing roles you were never meant to play. They won't respect you if you don't respect your own capacity, your own healing, your own growth. So let them call you high maintenance, let them call you picky, let them walk away because they think you're too strong, too sure, too direct. That's fine, let them go, because your peace is more important than their comfort. Your clarity is more valuable than their attention, and your standards, those beautiful earned, soul-protecting standards. They are the gatekeepers to the love you've been waiting for your whole life. And maybe, for the first time, that love starts with you, because the more you honor what you need, the less room you have for what drains you. The more you own your worth, the less you tolerate being undervalued. The more you show up as your full self, the more you repel anything and anyone that tries to dim that light. You're not hard to love, you're just not willing to be loved halfway anymore. You're not asking for too much. You're asking the wrong people. You're not high maintenance. You've just done the work and now you expect others to do it too. You're not guarded, you're aware. You're not cold, you're cautious, you're not mean. You're just no longer available for the emotional chaos that once felt like home. And the people who matter, the people who are ready, they won't see your standards as a challenge, they'll see them as alignment. They won't just meet your expectations, they'll exceed them. They won't try to test you, they'll try to understand you. They won't need to be chased, they'll stay, not because you begged, not because you bent, but because you finally believed that your love was rare, your presence was valuable, and your energy was sacred. And from that belief, you built standards that now protect everything you once gave away without hesitation. You love differently now, and the way you love yourself has changed the way you let others love you too. There is a peace that comes when you finally stop trying to be understood by the wrong people. A kind of quiet strength that settles into your bones when you no longer bend yourself into unnatural shapes to keep someone else comfortable. You remember what it felt like, don't you? To shrink just a little, dim your light just a bit, speak a little softer, want a little less, all in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, they'd choose you if you were easier to handle. But no matter how little you asked for, no matter how hard you tried to take up less space, they still left you feeling like a burden. And that's what really stays with you. The realization that you watered yourself down to the point where even you could barely recognize the person you'd become, and it still wasn't enough for them to stay, to care, to show up the way you needed. And at some point, something in you broke, not in a weak way, but in a freeing way, like a chain snapping after years of tension. You stopped believing that love had to be earned. You stopped confusing inconsistency with excitement. You stopped tying your value to how much someone else wanted you, and in that breaking, you began to rebuild, not quickly, not loudly, but intentionally. You began to understand that the right people, real people, grounded people, emotionally available people, don't leave you wondering where you stand. They don't speak in mixed signals and call it mystery. They don't make you question whether you're asking for too much just because you want to be treated with respect. They don't punish you with silence when you speak your truth. And they definitely don't make you feel like you have to compete for their affection. The right people make it clear from the start, not because they're trying to impress you, but because they've done the work. Because they know what it's like to be hurt, to be misread, to be left behind in moments when they needed love the most. So they move with intention, they speak with care, they don't throw words like forever or I love you around like confetti. They offer them with weight, with commitment, with consistency, and more than anything, they don't make you prove your worth. They simply see it. That's the difference. When someone truly sees you, not the image you present, not the mask you've learned to wear, not the version of you that's easier to digest, but you, fully, emotionally, messily you, they don't flinch. They don't retreat, they don't run, they lean in, they stay, they make room, they hold space for your contradictions, your fears, your soft spots. They don't try to fix you, they don't try to rescue you. They just witness you with tenderness and love you with clarity. And when that happens, when you're finally met like that, you start to unlearn everything you thought love had to be. Because for too long, love meant guessing. It meant overthinking. It meant reading between the lines of texts that never said enough. It meant explaining your needs only to be told you were too emotional. It meant waiting by the phone, hoping they'd come around, only to be let down again. It meant lowering the bar so they wouldn't trip over it. But the right love, the right person, the right connection, none of that exists there. You don't have to question your worth because your worth is reflected back to you in the way they show up. They remember what matters to you, not just birthdays or favorite songs, but how you like to be spoken to when you're anxious, how you need space when you're overwhelmed, how you show love through actions more than words. They pay attention, and not because they're trying to win you, but because they value you, because they've seen what it looks like to be neglected, and they refuse to repeat that pattern with someone they care about. And here's the wild part. You don't have to fight for that kind of love. You don't have to beg for it. You don't have to earn it by being perfect or quiet or easy. It just flows, not because it's effortless, but because it's intentional. The right people don't make love effortless. They make effort feel like love. Every small gesture, every honest conversation, every time they lean in instead of pull away when things get hard, it all becomes a quiet reminder that you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. You'll start to notice the way your body feels in their presence, how your shoulders drop a little, how your breath deepens, how your guard slowly softens, not because you're naive, but because you're safe. Because real love doesn't activate your anxiety, it soothes it. It doesn't create drama and call it passion. It builds stability and calls it peace. And for someone who's lived so long in survival mode, that kind of peace might feel unfamiliar at first. It might even feel boring, but over time you realize it's not boring. It's just new. It's what you were always meant to experience, but didn't believe you could have. And you will still have moments where your old wounds whisper doubts into your ear. You'll still wonder, what if I'm too much? What if they leave too? What if this is just temporary? But the difference now is that the right person doesn't run when those fears surface. They stay. They reassure, they remind you, you're safe here. They don't see your healing as baggage, they see it as the path you walked through to get to them, and they honor that, every scar, every lesson, every piece of the journey that shaped you. You don't have to perform anymore. You don't have to convince anyone of your heart. The right person doesn't need a PowerPoint presentation explaining why you're worthy of love. They feel it, they know it. And they show it, not once, not just in the beginning, but daily, through small acts of consistency, through emotional availability, through presence, and even in conflict. They don't weaponize your emotions. They don't disappear to gain power. They don't twist your words to avoid accountability. They communicate, they listen, they try, because that's what love does when it's real. It doesn't just show up when it's easy. It shows up especially when it's hard, and the more you experience that, the more you understand how unnatural your old definition of love was. You realize you were loving from a place of survival, not connection. You were loving people who kept you hungry, who kept you on edge, who kept you guessing. And now you're learning what it feels like to be full, to be grounded, to be chosen. Not for your usefulness, not for what you can give, not for how easy you are to handle, but for your soul. For your depth, for your truth. The right person doesn't try to dim that truth. They expand it, they elevate it. They remind you, even in silence, that your love is not only enough, it's a privilege. And because they see it that way, you begin to see yourself that way too. You start treating your energy like a sacred currency. You stop explaining your boundaries like apologies. You stop settling for potential wrapped in empty words. You start aligning with what reflects your growth. Because the right people don't distract you from your path. They walk beside you on it. They don't try to change your direction. They hold your hand while you both evolve. They don't need you to break yourself into pieces to fit into their life. They build a space for you as you are. Whole, imperfect, still growing, and maybe you haven't met them yet. Maybe you've only caught glimpses. Maybe you're still in the part of the journey where you're shedding what's not aligned. That's okay. Because every time you choose yourself, you make space for someone who will choose you too. Every time you walk away from almost love, you step closer to real love. Every time you say, this isn't enough, you reinforce the truth that you are. So no, the right people won't make you question your worth. They will remind you of it. They'll reflect it back to you. They'll treat you like someone they're grateful to know. They'll make love feel less like a performance and more like a return to home. They'll teach you that love isn't supposed to feel like tension. It's supposed to feel like truth, and with them you won't have to wonder, you'll just know. Because finally, after all you've been through, you will stop asking yourself, what's wrong with me? And start saying, I'm proud of who I am. And someone, somewhere is going to see that too, not because you begged them to, but because your worth is no longer up for negotiation. It never was. So if you're sitting there wondering if you'll ever be loved the way you love, let me say this, you will. But not by everyone, and that's a good thing, because not everyone deserves your kind of heart. Not everyone has the emotional bandwidth to hold what you bring. You are rare. Your love is sacred, and now, your standards are sacred too. You're not here to convince anyone of your worth. You're not here to beg for the bare minimum. You're here to grow, to protect your peace, and to be met where you stand. So protect your energy, raise your standards, and don't apologize for it, because the right ones, the ones who see you, they won't ask you to lower your standards just to meet them halfway. They'll rise to meet you